On today's episode of Bottles and Bites Without Borders, we're diving into why Americans drink wine and buy wine differently than our friends across the pond in Europe, and what can we learn from our friends? Let's get into it.
Welcome to Bottles and Bites Without Borders, where every sip and every bite tell a story. Rob is your host. Each week, he will take you on a delicious journey, from vineyard tales and distillery secrets to culinary traditions. So, grab a favorite drink, a plate of something tasty, and join us for another adventure with Bottles and Bites.
Hey everyone, how you doing tonight? Thanks so much for stopping in for another episode. I say tonight. How you doing? No matter what time of the day it is when you're listening to this podcast, more importantly, thank you for listening. Really appreciate that. In today's episode, we're going to dive into how American wine culture differs from those traditional wine cultures. When I say traditional, let's think European. And when I say European, let's think those three countries that most of us go to when we think about, old world wine. That would be France, Italy, and Spain. And we want to talk about the differences in how people buy wine, how we drink wine, how we think about wine, and what those differences say about, our relationships with wine as a country, as a people, our relationships with the food and wine together, and how wine is part of our life, incorporated to our lifestyles. And so we're going to get into all this on today's episode. So here in the States, there's no doubt about it. I mean, we are probably the world's largest consumer of wine. I mean, we're a big country to begin with. We love wine here in the U.S., but the way we drink it, the way we buy it, the way we talk about it, it's completely different from how people in Europe or even South American countries or other parts of the world, how they approach wine. And so I want to get into that today a little bit. And I was thinking about talking or doing this episode because, I've kind of been in this world of wine through the podcast, through just my curiosity. I'm just this average guy who loves food, wine, whiskey, coffee, all these great things. But in my, call it my journey, my exploration of all these things, food, wine, whiskey, I've kind of been in this bubble around people who also love and enjoy these things. And I when you're in an area like that, a bubble like that, you start to think that, well, this isn't just my bubble. This is the world, right? This is at least my country. This is how everybody is in my country. And, it was recently that I was rudely awakened to go, I'm really a very small minority of, call it, I always say that wine nerd, that wine geek. Most people are not into wine or approach wine or on that journey in wine that I've been on. And it made me wonder, how are we so different as a culture in the United States than our friends across the pond in Europe, these old world wine countries? Why do we think about wine different? Why do we buy it different? Why is this happening? So I did a little research and I wanted to dive into this and to get some answers for myself, and then also to share what I found out with you all. So today we're going to be exploring how Americans think about wine compared to the rest of the world. And, what can we learn? That's kind of the point of this podcast, is to pass on a little knowledge to everybody on what can we learn from what our counterparts do across the pond to maybe help us appreciate, enjoy, buy, understand wine a little bit better, maybe make it more a part of our lifestyle, not just something that we take part in once in a while. So let's jump into the segments that we have for this episode today. And the first one's going to be how we buy wine. And as Americans, we really shop for wine. We really shop at retail shops. We don't have relationships with buyers or small shops for the most part. I think when you hear me talking about, you should always buy wines at a local wine shop, I truly believe that, and I practice that here where I live in the Houston area. But I don't think that's I know it's not a very large part of the population who buy wine. We know in doing a little looking that, 95% of the wines purchased by consumers in the United States are at retail shops. So we're talking grocery stores. We're talking box stores like Total Wine. We're talking places like Costco. These retailers sell a tremendous volume of wine. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I would say is I would give the suggestion, the recommendation that we all kind of start there. I started there. The point I'm making is most people live there. Most people in wine find one or two wines they like, and that's all they ever drink. I can't tell you the number of times I go to the grocery store. I'm in the wine aisle. I'm just looking around, maybe something would be on sale or something new came in. We have a couple grocery stores here in town that do a really good job at bringing in some really cool bottles of wine. So when I'm in the area and I'm shopping, every so often I'll see somebody and, I'm a wine snob. So yes, I look at what they're putting in their cart and I see it, not all the time, but frequently enough that I just kind of scratch my head where I'll see people who have, they give you that little 6-pack carrier. Some places it's like a cardboard little 6-pack carrier. Some it's like a cloth bag that you could put it in. And I'll see these folks who have 6 bottles of the same wine that they've packed into that carrier. And I'm going, scratching my head going, man, that is crazy. Why are you buying the same wine? I really have to restrain myself sometimes that I don't go up and ask, bluntly why are you buying the same wine? And then why aren't you exploring? If you like this wine, are you asking questions? Are you trying to find what else you could like? Because it just baffles me. I think about it in terms of, eating food. I know there's not anybody who's listening to this that eats the same meal every night of the week. Nobody does it. We like a little diversity. We like a little, moving of the flavor wheel a little bit on things that we're going to have. Sometimes we want something a little more simple. Sometimes it's something that, we want a little bit more complexity in flavors and things. Wine should be thought of that same way. So as Americans, we don't do that. We shop at retailers and we shop for the same bottles for the most part. Now, when I say we shop for the same bottles, I say that because usually it's the same bottle, meaning the label. We're shopping for labels. Does it look cool? Am I attracted to that? Do I like that label for whatever reason? Scores, we shop for that. Does it have a high score? Anything over 92 used to be, anything that hit 90. Now I think you got to have 92 or 93 to get, people's attention anymore. It's crazy with the points. And then, of course, price, right? We shop, labels, scores, and price rather than actually understanding what's in the bottle. What's the grape I'm drinking? Who are producers of this grape? And what are some of the regions or appellations that these grapes come from? So we have this kind of understanding of what we're getting. We don't do a good job of that. And Europeans do. They really do. They shop locally, often buying directly from winemakers or small local shops. And I get it. You're going, hey, Rob, look, these are wine countries where they have winemakers in every part of their country, Italy being an example of that. Spain and France also being an example of that. I get it. But we're also blessed here in the States where the global market comes to us. I mean, everything that those folks have available to them, we have that plus a whole lot more. And so I get that. We also, Americans are marketing driven, meaning people understand how we buy and they market to our buying kind of habits. So they're going to create these, creative labels. They're going to get celebrities involved in their brands. They want shelf talkers, people on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube that have some influence to, talk about these brands, back these brands, partner with them to push these brands because they want us to buy them. And you don't see that in Italy or France or Spain at all. It really is about what's in the bottle. When you next time you go to the wine store, whether it be a grocery store, box store, or a wine shop, take a look at how labels are on bottles of wine from each of the countries or regions. Look at wines from Italy and France, look at their labels, and then look at what you might see in an American wine section, whether it be Napa Valley, California, or not just California, but like Santa Barbara, Paso Robles, someplace like that, Oregon, Washington State. Those are probably some of the bigger, more distributed regions, obviously California and Napa being the biggest. Look at those labels, compare them to, what Old World does, Spain, France, Italy. They're not trying to get you to buy it based on that label alone. They might get you to buy it based on the information they put on the label, but it's not some pretty picture. It doesn't have a story that makes you feel a certain way, and then you go, oh, we ought to buy this bottle. They're not doing that. They want you to get the information you need to go, this sounds delicious. This sounds really good, and I think I want to buy this bottle of wine. So, I think understanding that, getting away from buying from the outside and then getting home and trying what's on the inside, you really need to start understanding what's on the inside of that bottle and really get past the labeling, other than looking for and understanding the information on the label that helps you understand what's inside that bottle. Hope that wasn't too confusing. The bottom line there is it's always more important what's in the bottle, not the label that's on the bottle. So getting to understand that really will help you appreciate and have better wine in your glass. The next topic I want to talk about, is how we drink wine. And we really differ big time from our European counterparts when it comes to drinking wine, right? In the U.S., wine is often this special occasion. It's for dinner parties. It's for holidays. It's for a special night or wine night, right? We have to have a reason to open a bottle of wine. Where when you think about, Europe, it's a fabric of their diet, if you will. With most meals, usually lunch and dinner, there's wine that will be served, when we talk about the countries that we're talking about today. And that's just greatly different from us. They don't think about, wine as far as, when we do decide that we're going to have wine with a meal, with a dinner or something, we really put the pressure. We really stress a little bit about, oh my gosh, I'm cooking this great meal. Now, how do I decide what wine to have? And how do I make sure that when I choose that wine, it actually is perfect with this meal? I mean, we really put this stress and pressure on us to make the wine really work super well. And it doesn't have to be that complicated. It doesn't have to be that hard. We in the States make it that hard. In Europe, they don't. They're just like, hey, we're making dinner, grab a bottle. And they just grab a bottle and start pouring. And that's how we should be. So I think Americans tend to view wine through this lifestyle lens, of sophistication, class, wealth, health, and kind of identity, and I don't like that. I'm huge into wine. I love wine. I love exploring. I like drinking different bottles of wine. I like drinking bottles that cost, in different price points. But I'll be honest and tell you, I don't like drinking at high-end wine restaurants. And I don't like the snobbery of wine. I don't think it needs to be there. And I think too many times in America, when you want to, explore wine, try wine, have wine at a restaurant, there's a lot of, pressure. And I don't think it's not intended to be that way. It's just kind of the culture that we've created around wine. And I know the industry itself is trying to fix this, but man, it's hard to fix something that's been around for so long in the way that it has. But that's a big part of it, our lifestyle lens, that everybody who thinks wine, one, I think they think they have to have a lot of education to be able to order a wine. And two, they just think it's going to be way too expensive. And that's also not true at a lot of restaurants and things like that. So I think, the rise of wine education, let me say that again, the rise of wine education culture, like the WSET, the Wine and Spirits Education Trust out of London, a lot of people doing SOM classes, tastings, just private classes with somebody who's a wine educator to help you get a little bit more versed in wines. Americans are doing that. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I actually think that's a pretty good thing because, the main reason would be versus Europe, where people just grow up with it. It's part of their life. It's part of their lifestyle. It's everywhere for them. We don't have that. We have to go find wine. And so having the WSET, having tastings, having classes that you can do at whether it be local wine shops or wine schools or things like that, I actually think that's a really good thing. And I'm glad Americans are starting to do more of that and really understand wine. And that's for their benefit, right? That way they can understand what they like, why they like those wines. And as they're continuing their journey, they're going to be better equipped to go, find and make decisions on trying certain wines based on understanding their palate. So I think that's really good. I mean, for me, myself, I started in just drinking and experimenting and trying stuff and didn't really understand. I will tell you, a few years ago, I started the WSET program. And when I did that and I got a little bit more wine education, it really helped me understand wine much better, which translated to me really diving into a global exploration of wine, whether it be Italian wines, Spanish wines, French wines, Portugal wines, all these different wines that are just phenomenal. And that's very different than Italians or Spanish or French. They're very casual about it, but that's because wine's in their backyard all over. And it's also because even from country to country, if you're going to travel from France to Italy, depending on what part of Italy you're in, if you're in the northern part, it's just an hour and a half, couple hours, to get to, and some places it's not even that far. I'm just saying it's, Slovenia up in northern Italy and these kind of places to Alto Adige and these other places up in northern Italy, France to Germany, to Spain, all these countries very close by. So the understanding, the ability to go and taste and do things in these wines, and in all of these countries having wine as part of their culture, their life, it's a European thing. And so I do agree that here in the States, we have to work a little bit more if you're getting into wine to understand it, because it's not right there for you. You have to go learn, versus in Europe, it's right there for them. And it's kind of, as they grow up, they're given that knowledge. They're educated on wine, how it's consumed, the different kinds, things like that. So big difference there as well. Now, the next thing let's talk about is something you've heard me say so many times. Don't overthink food with wine. And I kind of mentioned it earlier in one of the topics we were talking about. And I think a lot of times Americans stress out about that pairing, right? I think I was talking about it when you're going to have a special night with wine. Trying to get it right, trying to make it the perfect match. It's just not that complicated. It doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be. Not that it doesn't have to be. It's just not. It shouldn't be. Don't think about it too much. There's some simple common sense rules that you can apply, but after that, it's pretty straightforward. So, in traditional cultures, in these countries that we're talking about, they really don't put a lot of effort into pairing. It's really, and we hear this a lot in the wine world. They always say, what's grown together goes together. And so, local foods are always going to go with local wines. But I understand that we still get back to, well, we don't have local food and we don't have those local wines. So we have to, kind of adjust. Well, we're in the United States. We have the availability of almost all the foods from around the globe. I mean, we are, very diverse. So no matter, Italian, French, Spanish, for the most part, those dishes are available here. And heck, all of us like to cook now. We can make these dishes at home. And that could be a fun thing to do as well, is to make a dish from a country and go buy a bottle of wine from that region and enjoy it with it. So we have those abilities in the States to do that, and we need to do more of that. But I would also say you don't have to overthink it, meaning you don't have to have an Italian wine with every Italian food you have. There can be times where you want to have a French wine with Italian food or Italian wine with French food. It can go together. So, but, there is some regionality that shapes the intuitive pairings that a lot of countries have. Think about Sangiovese and how it goes so well with tomato-based pastas, or Albarino goes so well with seafoods. These kind of pairings, they go together for a reason. So, but taking that, you can kind of build off that. That's just kind of a foundation. So from there, you can go in a couple different directions and still be okay. So let's talk a little bit about how Americans often choose the wine first, then the food. Where in the old world, it's the reverse of that mindset. And the old world does it right. You need to pick, what do we want to eat tonight, or what do we want to order off of this menu? And then you go, okay, now that we know what we're eating, what would be a good wine to go with that? And that's how you should pair food and wine in the simplest of terms, right? So, we really need to relax the way that we think about pairing food. We don't have to have the anxiety that, a lot of people have. A lot of people don't even order wine at a restaurant, even a restaurant with a great menu, with a great wine list with really good prices, because of the intimidation factor. They're too focused on, trying to get it perfect instead of on, just make sure it balances with the food, that it works a little bit, and then enjoy it. Don't overthink it. Just put it in the glass, enjoy the food, have great conversation, and move on. Have a great time. That's really, wine is about bringing people together, just like food. So enjoy them both together with great company. Let's just real quick, finishing up on pairing foods, just a quick kind of example. Let's just think about a cheeseburger. And you go, okay, well, what could you pair that with? Well, you can go with a lot of different things. Toppings could drive it a little bit, but you could go with a big Cabernet. You could go with a Merlot. You could go with a Sangiovese, either a Chianti Classico, a Brunello. You could go with a Syrah from Northern Rhone. I mean, there's so many wines that work with that food. And that's kind of the point is, when you think about foods, there's not one wine that would work with it. There's a plethora of wines that would work with that food. And that's the bigger reason why I say don't overthink it. What you pick is probably going to work just fine. So just pick it, pour it, and enjoy it. It's that simple. So just some takeaways from what we can learn as Americans from our friends from across the pond in Europe. We need to be more relaxed. We need to have an everyday approach to wine. Doesn't mean drink a couple bottles every day, but having a glass of wine or a couple glasses with dinner each night, perfectly acceptable. And, wine's made to go with food, especially old world wine. So enjoy it as part of the meal. It's like, if you're going to pour a glass of something with your meal, why not be wine? It's a great place to have a glass of wine, not just on the back patio, but with your meal. Learn, I think we need to learn from Europe's approach of simplicity and connection to place. Again, I understand we're in the States, but understanding, Italians, how they do food, their simplicity to meals, French, their approach to food and meals, and how wine is a part of that. And we just need to take it the same way and be real simple. I'm going to have a blank red wine because I'm having a steak, or I'm going to have a cheeseburger and I'm going to get a blank red wine. And it's really that easy. Don't overthink it. Keep it simple. At the same time, we need to celebrate what we do well as an American wine consumer. And I think we're seeing that when I was talking about, Americans getting more educated, taking classes, trying to understand wines from around the world. That's really one of the shining points of Americans is we have this openness to global wines. And I think one of the reasons is, believe it or not, wines from around the globe are typically way more cost effective. I don't want to say cheaper because the quality's as good or better, but they're less expensive. So global wines from a pocketbook standpoint make more sense to buy. And they're made in a way that, go with food. They're meant to go with food. And so Americans are doing that well. They're getting more open to trying wines from around the globe. And then just our curiosity, we really have this curiosity of exploring and trying, I heard somebody talking about the other day, a reel that, kind of shitting on Americans a little bit because we don't travel as much as people in Europe. And a guy came back at him and defended the Americans. And I thought this was a good point. He said they really don't have to, because if you look at the massive size of the United States, all 50 states are almost like, 50 different countries, and they have that whole kind of playground to explore, to go travel, the upper Northwest to the lower Southwest or Southeast in Florida, to the upper Northeast in Boston and New York, down to, San Diego and LA and California. I mean, and then all the places in between. He really made a good point, made me think about it a little bit, that, in America, we don't travel as much, but we do explore things because we have this ability to get it here in the States. We have the influence of the globe in America. And so we still get to experience it without actually traveling. And wine is no exception to that. We do a really good job of exploring the world of wine. I know I do, and I see a lot of other people kind of getting on board with exploring the world of wine. So, and we have that curiosity. And then we have the innovation, right? We need to keep, finding ways to get these wines, try these wines, and enjoy wines from other places, and food for that matter. A lot of times it can be a new food that you want to try, and then in your mind you're going, whoa, hold on a second. That would go great with this kind of wine, after you've had that dish. So I think that's, something that we're really good at as well. We're not afraid to try things. So that's very cool. So I would challenge, the listeners to, this week, pop a bottle of wine for dinner for no reason at all. Tell your wife or your husband, you know what, I'm going to make this dish tomorrow night. I'm going to pop us a bottle of wine. Let's just sit down and enjoy. Do that. Also, go out and buy a wine from a small local shop instead of a big chain. But while you do that, promise me you'll have a conversation with somebody in the store for at least 3 minutes talking about wine. And I think you're going to, get your eyes opened up a little bit to how shopping in a local store is going to greatly help you in exploring the world of wine, going to help you make some good decisions on what you decide to buy. And by the way, don't be afraid to give your budget. That's what they're there for. Give them a price that you want to spend. It can be $15, and they're still going to steer you to a great bottle of wine. And then, pair some American dishes. Try something that you love as an American dish, and then find an old world wine, something from Spain, from France, from Italy. It can be another old world country if you want. I just think those three are the easiest. And pair it with it. Enjoy it. Hit me up on social media. Look at the description of this podcast. You'll have all my emails, ways to contact me. I'd love to hear, what dish you cooked from the States and then what wine from an old world country and what grape was it that you paired with that dish. I think that would be really, really cool. So, there was a famous quote one time that said, wine doesn't have to be complicated. It's meant to just be shared, not studied. I think that's a good way to look at it. Now, I might push back a little bit because I do like kind of analyzing, studying, understanding wine a little bit. So there you go. Well, let's finish up with a few things here. I'd love to know, again, send me a comment, send me an email. Do you already have an approach to wine? Are you in this journey of exploring? Where are you in that journey? Hit me up. Let me know. Do you look at wine as a special treat, or is it a part of your life? Do you have it multiple times during the week? And by the way, just talking about, you should be on a journey. I think wine is that way, and also kind of touching on how big the states are. I feel like I'm a pretty well-versed guy in wine as a consumer, somebody that's not necessarily in the industry. But I'm always still trying to learn. And I've got an upcoming episode. This past weekend, I had the opportunity to go to a master class on Oregon wines, the wines of Oregon here in the States, which I don't know a lot about or didn't until I took this class. It was given by Bree Stock, who is a master of wine. She did a great job. It's a 2-hour class, really a deep dive into Oregon, the different AVAs, the different terrains, the different soil types, the grapes that they're growing. And I'm looking forward to having an episode on that coming out here pretty soon to talk about the wines of Oregon. So look for that coming out here pretty soon. So finishing up, what can we take away from all this? Well, I think it's pretty simple. Americans have made wine a part of our lifestyle, but we can still learn a lot from places where wine is a part of the daily life. We don't have to overthink it. We don't have to chase scores or save the good bottles for a special night or a celebration. The next time you make a dinner, open something just because. My wife always says that. I go, hey, it's Tuesday. She goes, doesn't matter. Let's open up a good one. And I think that's a good approach. So try a local wine or something from a small importer. Pair it with something that's, on your plate. Doesn't have to be anything special. Just don't even think about it. Don't worry if it's not perfect, because wine isn't supposed to be about all these rules. It's about connection. It's about flavor and a little joy in the everyday. Thanks for listening to Bottles and Bites Without Borders. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, leave a review, and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or X. You can also find all our episodes and videos at bottlesandbiteswb.com. That's bottlesandbiteswb.com. I'm Rob, your host. Cheers. And remember, great bottles and great bites are even better when they cross borders. Have a good night, everyone.